Hi, good evening, all of you, and welcome to a new episode of Arguably the Reading Quest. I am Nishant. It just appeared to me that it's been really long since I have talked to you about some really good and great novel in details in a single episode. Although I have done a series of 4 episodes on philosophical novels, but it's been long since I have talked about one single novel in details, as some of you have requested in the column as well that, I should talk about one particular book at length. So here is one book. So this is about a genius who was nominated for a record 9 times for a Nobel Prize in Literature. And he lost to Albert Camus in the year 1957 by 1 vote. So we are talking about none other than Nikos Kazantzakis and his book, The Last Temptation of Christ. Nikos Kazantzakis. Nikos Kazantzakis was a Greek poet, a Greek novelist, a philosopher, a journalist, and one of the widely translated novelists from Greek and a giant of modern Greek literature. I don't know how many of you know about this writer, but the purpose of this video is to introduce you to this writer. But before that, please listen to some of the quotes that gives you an idea, and then I'll, explain you what the book is all about. So there's a conversation between Judas and Jesus here. Will you, Judas, my brother? God will give you the strength as much as you lack, because it is necessary for me to be killed and for you to betray me. We too must save the world. Help me. Jesus is saying to Judas. Judas bowed his head. After a moment he asked, if you had to betray your master, would you do it? Jesus reflected for a long time. Finally he said, no, I am afraid I wouldn't be able to. That is why God pitied me and gave me the easier task, to be crucified. A prophet is one who, when everyone else despairs, hopes. And when everyone else hopes, he despairs. You will ask me why. It is because he has mastered the great secret, that the wheel turns. The more he approached the people and perceived their anger-filled eyes and the dark, tortured fearlessness of their expressions, the more his heart stirred. The more his bowels flooded with deep sympathy and love. These are the people, he reflected. They're all brothers, every one of them. But they do not know it, and that is why they suffer. If they knew it, what celebration there would be, what hugging and kissing, what happiness, what a joy life would be, says Nikos Kazantzakis in The Last Temptation of Christ. This book was called Spiritual Dynamite by San Francisco Chronicle. And this book is a scream, says an author P. Camus, a pure scream made out of love and pain. And it will sound until the end of time. That is all I can say. And he was a giant of modern Greek literature, one of the most translatable Greek author worldwide. And nominated for a Nobel Prize in Literature 9 times. So you can imagine the importance of this book and this genius. So the last temptation of Christ happened when Christ was hanging on the cross. As suddenly he was tempted. So he was tempted to, he suddenly visualized himself as living a normal life with Mary Magdalene as his wife, after choosing to abandon his calling. So, the novel opens with Jesus in the desert, struggling with his divine calling and the knowledge of his imminent death. Throughout the book, Jesus grapples with the human desire and the temptation to lead a normal life, away from the suffering and sacrifice that he knows awaits him. However, the climax of the novel takes a different turn when Jesus is shown dying on the cross, only to awaken in a vision of a world where he was living a normal life, having his children and grandchildren, and a normal life with Mary Magdalene. By choosing to abandon his calling, In this world, Jesus experiences love, pain, suffering just as any other human being. And as he lives out his life in this alternate world, Jesus begins to question whether or not his divine mission was worth all of the suffering he went through. Eventually, he realizes that though he would have been content with living a normal life, his death is rendered meaningless, and he would at best be remembered as a philosopher. But if he would die for a divine mission, for a greater calling. And he sacrificed himself for the fate of humanity, and he willingly returns to his fate as the Son of God. And the novel concludes with Jesus ascending to heaven, leaving a legacy behind of love, sacrifice, and redemption. And you can imagine the book was scandalous. Again, one of the critics observed when it was published by Kazantzakis in the year 1955. And the reason that he, despite being a fervent Orthodox Christian, was denied a Christian burial. Well, like when Rushdie imagined the satanic verses that perhaps Satan sat on Muhammad's shoulder and dictated parts of Quran, Kazantzakis looked at the human side of Christ as depicted in the Gospel of Mark, where he is more of a man than a God-man or than a son of God. He allows Jesus to have sexual fantasies about Mary Magdalene and experiences the guilt of these fantasies and walks through them. And the language is very poetic. You can, experience it firsthand. And you can also experience vicariously the spiritual fervor of Palestine at that time, the beautiful landscape of Palestine. You know what Palestine used to look. The social acceptances of visions, miracles, prophecies, and a very intense and a palpable spiritual reality of the time. So I strongly recommend this book. Also, I will summarize here the opinion of Lord Williams. Lord William was a former Archbishop of Canterbury. Canterbury, was made famous by Chaucer in his writing The Canterbury Tales, the father of English poetry. And he is considered as an intellectual hero by many Christians worldwide. So please watch this part of the episode because this is the most important part of the episode. So this is what Lord William tells us, that one of the things that makes us human is that we can allow the divine light to flood us and fill us. Or as some theologians say, we can grow into the divine image. So I think Nikos Kazantzakis is right in saying that it's not a question of just one eccentric individual who lived centuries ago, but it is about the destiny of humanity. It is about how humanity itself grows into that divine image, where Nikos Kazantzakis' view is more at odds with the classical Christian view in that he tends to merge the divinity-humanity tension with the flesh-spirit tension, which is historically and theologically not correct, as Lord William says, to which I disagree. Lord William also says about this book is that they said Kazantzakis tried to portray a Jesus who was more human and relatable than one in the Gospel. I think for a Christian, Jesus must be like us, enough to understand what he meant, what he was all about, and different enough to spring from a trap of a humanity that turned on itself. However, the paradox in Kazantzakis' narrative is that Jesus is this extraordinarily unusual, tormented, and unique individual. To try and make out his psychology in the novel is very hard. I am not sure at all if I understand quite what the enormous gear shift in the stories are all about. In some ways, in trying so hard to make Jesus more human, he created a Jesus at least as difficult and remote as the Jesus of classical theology. This is what William of Canterbury tells us. And at last, the notion that Jesus is in a state of constant inner flux about his identity and mission, I'm not so sure. In the Gospel, the tension comes from someone who knows who he is, and again he needs to confront the cost and the consequences of that. But that is very different from the unceasing struggle of Nikos Kazantzakis' Jesus to find a place to stand. So you see, this man, nominated for a record 9 times for literature novel, denied a Christian burial for writing this novel, and this novel was filmed by Scorsese, was blacklisted by the Vatican, has been leveled, blasphemous, heretical, and is also a masterpiece. His Christ is an epic conception, a wholly original Christ, not as a man God, but as a human being who is very much aware of his psyche power, who is very much aware of his divine calling, and who struggles between the dichotomies, one his divine calling and one his temptation for flesh, and his temptation to live a normal life with his partner Mary Magdalene. So a searing, soaring and shocking novel, as the time tells us. So this is all for this episode. If you have still not liked, shared and subscribed my channel, Arguably the Reading Quest, please do that. Please spread the word. Thank you all of you. Happy reading.